All right. I'm going to call a work session to order. Mayor Kavanaugh's absent on city business. I forget whether he's in Chicago right now or if he's
in New Hampshire.
right now. He's in New Hampshire visiting with Franklin Pierce, University of Franklin Pierce, doing city business. So we have an agenda item to discuss GPEC and get an update regarding the Greater Phoenix Economic Council regional economic development activities. I believe Harry is in the lobby anticipating Barry Broom, but as we all know, when folks come from Central Phoenix, sometimes the traffic is a little worse than expected. So if nobody objects on council, I'd like to recess the work session, start the special meeting. We'll get through the all-mail ballot discussion, and when Mr. Broom arrives, we'll finish up the all-mail ballot. So if there's no objection, I think the proper, right? I can recess the work session. So we'll recess the work session at this time, and I will call the roll in then. I'm going to ask that Councilmember Holland lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stand. And bow your head as a sign of respect to our military on duty here and overseas, and protect them, especially our sons in Afghanistan. Please protect our firemen and policemen that guard the home front and keep them safe. Our community, city, and business leaders, may they make good decisions. And special thoughts for the refugees around the world. May they soon find homes. Amen.
Amen. With respect to our visitor, Barry, I went ahead and rolled into our special meeting. We've got a brief item that we were going to take up after your presentation. So get settled in. Watch us discuss the all-mail.
Of external affairs or external communications. So we appreciate to have them there. You remember several months ago, actually it was back in September, a couple of months ago, we provided the council with a yellow paper talking about our annual membership and marketing contract and the benefits of that. GPEC definitely is one of our most valued members, and you had requested a work session with GPEC to get updated on their initiatives and to be able to answer any questions that Barry may have. And I'm available too, as if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to fill in as well. With that, I guess we'll turn it over to Barry.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. The traffic at I-10 wasn't too bad, so we're getting a little better. Something's working. I'm always out here saying, okay, if you drive this way, how do you sell it? But so we're getting better, and Goodyear's doing very well, obviously within GPEC's membership, but a lot of it has been Goodyear's achievement. One of the things that happens all the time for us is we create opportunities for the region, and sometimes our communities aren't positioned well enough to take advantage of them, or we don't get the support from the state. So the good news that we have coming out of Goodyear, I think, is the leadership of all of you and Brian's hard work and Harry and your economic development team. So it's always a community that puts its best foot forward when we bring in companies, and I think you should be rest assured that your team's representing you well and your community well, and I'm sure you are very proud of them, and we're proud of them too. Obviously, one of the things that we try to do, how do you get 18 communities to kind of share an economic development effort and have it be fair? Well, all the communities pay the same. Sometimes it's a small dollar amount, sometimes it's larger, but they all pay into GPEC on a per capita basis. And we measure return on investment. And at $221 back for every dollar you invest, you're doing very well on the return side. But for a community that's still emerging, you've done a pretty good job with infrastructure. You have some mature infrastructure, so you're able to get some impacts. For instance, like Rubbermaid, it's a facility that probably through this credit crisis is going to take a while to get turned, but probably will deliver a pretty strong employer here, I hope, in the next 12 to 18 months. Therefore, infrastructure gives you the advantage to land an employer that might pull from a workforce from a broad base. You've, in the last 5 years, 1,900 direct jobs. One of my favorite deals or projects that's out here is Cancer Treatment Centers of America. We were really proud of that. that came into the region, and your community worked very hard to pull that forward. Then we kind of got to look forward, which is focusing on high-wage industries, primarily in solar, which we call renewable energy, but we really do mean solar. We don't have a lot of wind deals in Arizona, not a lot of wave. I think our opportunity in the renewable space is solar, although we're going to work on it from a renewable perspective because there's no reason for us to turn down any business opportunity for the region. And then we like the healthcare sector. So even during this very difficult credit crunch, healthcare is still running at double-digit growth. And there was a tremendous amount of investment capital put in and already released into the solar industry in 2007. So even though that'll be slower than we expected because of the credit crunch, it's our belief that healthcare, renewable technologies, and international will kind of be the first out of the box once that credit comes back. And of course, I think that's optimistically, I think we're going to start to see a change in the market conditions by as early as April. Prior to the Wall Street situation, we were on track to have our best year. So even though the market really was suffering in 2007. I mean, we had we had the largest drop in our employment position in the history of Arizona from 2006 to 2007. We dropped from number 1 in job performance to 22. Some markets had us 19. That was the most significant drop we'd ever had in job performance. And so the drop from 2007 to 2008 was felt more sharply because we actually dropped to 49th in job performance. So right now, Arizona's 49th in the nation in job growth. So that can tell you how quick your fortunes can turn. And of course, one of the things that we do at GPEC is we always, work with, great urgency during periods of prosperity, gobble up as much of that prosperity as possible. And during periods of downturns afford you really unique opportunities. I mean, a downturn like this has really only occurred probably in 80, 81, 82. I mean, the 89, 90, 91 downturn that you heard in this market. But for the banking situation, that downturn's probably not as strong from an employment standpoint as this one will be. But it was really the 80, 81, 82 downturn that's probably going to be the most significant relative to this impact. We actually went to 11% unemployment back in that period. Right now we're running at about 6.1 to 6.2% unemployment, and there's a debate on whether or not that'll top out at 6.5 or 7. I still feel like the market's going to hold. Our banking system is doing very well, unlike 1989, 90, 91, 92. Our banks are not in the soup. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Chase are all in acquisition mode. They did not go upside down. B of A had a little bit of a problem. A lot of our mid-sized banks are healthy. We've really only had a couple of financial institutions in the market so far really fall prey to the subprime lending. I'm not naive enough to think there isn't one or two more out there hanging by their fingernails, but I think throughout this issue you're going to find that there were a lot of lessons learned in 1989 in the banking industry, and thankfully they didn't repeat those. And so having a good capital position right now, I think, is going to be very helpful. What I have in front of you is one of the things that we've been working on, hopefully with the governor's office and legislators. When we talk about building an economy, we're really talking about an economic development system. So if you don't have aggressive marketing, then obviously you don't get the looks. And a lot of that aggressive marketing, for instance, in the international market, in 2005 when I came in as the president of GPEC, Councilman Cavalier was on my board, and we launched that international program, and I think Councilwoman Lord kind of came in and helped pick that up. And when we did it, if you remember, Councilwoman, people were kind of looking at us like we were heading in some kind of strange direction. But in 2007, it was almost 40% of our economic performance because the value of the dollar dropped and international was very strong. So if you look at the market right now, Japan's economy has hardly participated in the subprime lending, and the yen is at its all-time high, and Japan is the #1 investor in Arizona. So when you're looking at building economic models, when you say Japan, well, why Japan? Well, it's the #1 investor internationally in the state of Arizona. It has no credit impact because of their financial crisis in the 80s, their banks remained conservative and did not get deep into this mortgage lending. And the yen is very high, which means Arizona's on sale. So to our largest foreign investor, there could be some big opportunities, and we have to pay attention to that. So when you build these outreach and marketing programs, it's not just so much about this kind of shotgun marketing approach. It's really about peeling the onion back and paying attention to where there are real opportunities. And so we see real opportunities out of Germany, London, Spain, for Goodyear, the Netherlands, which we are very excited about their investment level in Arizona. And then, of course, Japan, which is a cultural hurdle, but has an aggressive inward investment here. We like California, obviously. I think we've seen reports where Arizona is no longer in the top 10 in states for California companies choosing locations outside of California. So the competition out there is very fierce, where 10, 15 years ago, you left California, you went into Arizona, or you went into Colorado around Denver, or maybe if you were IT, you went to Seattle. But now the southern states, Atlanta, Raleigh, Charlotte, places like Nashville have put big emphasis into promoting their states into California, offer overall better business environments than Arizona, and they have transactional tools that help offset the cost for companies making decisions. Cancer Treatment Centers of America is going to be a big win, and I really think it's already giving us looks in the healthcare market that we otherwise wouldn't get. We're getting opportunities in the healthcare market through cancer treatment centers that we wouldn't get through Mayo Clinic, and we wouldn't get through Banner, and we wouldn't get through Scottsdale, because cancer treatment centers prepared to provide treatment to people, at a very late and sometimes desperate stage in battling cancer. Well, if you take the entire oncology market, who do they interface with if they're still planning on building healthcare treatments and products to treat that late stage? This is one of the most important institutions in the United States working in this space. So, on one hand, it's about going into Los Angeles and Chicago and New York and doing this big tent marketing around consultants and investment bankers, talking about the morphing Arizona state from a old cotton state to a new technology center. And then sometimes it gets back to splicing down to a vaccine company that's in a highly specialized treatment space for late-stage cancer, and you have Cancer Treatment Centers of America, so you can grab a guy like David Villette and go in and make a unique presentation to that company and give them a partnership they might not find in too many places in the United States. So as we build this economic model, understanding how our communities get empowered, obviously there's going to be unprecedented investment in clean and renewable technologies. So in addition to having economic development programs that pursue this industry, showing them a community that lives and eats and breathes that clean technology is going to be really important. I mean, if we're going to be a player in solar, we're going to have to build state economic development programs that are competitive, but they're going to have to come in and see communities that have panels on the rooftops. I mean, they're not going to bring their jobs into a state that doesn't take advantage of the technology. And if you got 335 days of sun, they're going to consider you almost obstructionist if they don't see the technology. So there's a big opportunity there for us, but we're actually going to have to pull some levers to do it. And then around these communities build capabilities through things like tax credits and investment opportunities to help support these companies, and then do the outreach more broadly than just generalized marketing, but highly specialized niche marketing, and then build it around a bigger program. So during this downturn, I would consider the next 18 months, believe it or not, it's been prior to 2007 since we've had what you would call an active capital investment pool from publicly traded companies. So Wall Street started cooling off well into 2007. So a big part of our body of work is, which will populate the West Valley, I think, in the next economic cycle, is these 150, 250, 500,000, sometimes million square foot projects that need to come out into, put a new foothold into the southwestern part of the United States, and are looking for a place where they can attract young talent and build a new corporate presence and have customers. And I think the Valley has been positioned very well for that. And a lot of the business track record at GPEC over the last several years was built around that opportunity. Not necessarily the pure corporate headquarters, but almost the employment center of the companies. Sometimes the sales and training offices, customer service, some of the back office and some of the other piece, which creates, large-scale development. But those have been off really since then. What we've been really building our bread and butter around has been, creating this market as an international destination place as an alternative to California, which I think we're going to build a big business in. If we can get a little bit of help from the state and take this seriously, international markets absolutely love Arizona. If you go into New York and call on New York City about Arizona, or even Los Angeles, they've already got a preconceived notion about us. And in some cases, we're kind of an ancillary market where they might put some cheap labor plays out of L.A. New York, for the most part, Boston, not really even considering us. If you haven't been to New York and Boston on a business transaction, no one is smarter than people in New York and Boston, I assure you, and they'll be the first to tell you. But if you go into Europe, they're fascinated with Arizona. The Europeans love us. They loved us in Germany. We have 29 executives coming this weekend to spend 3 days looking at the market, and a good percentage of them are out of Spain, Austria, and Germany. So this international business we're really excited about. It's also a high-wage business, so the investments that come out of the international markets, their average wage is about 32 to 50% higher than the U.S. national average because it's mature, compelling companies. The renewable industries, depending on what staggering report you want to look at, some say 1 in 4 jobs by 2030 will be connected back to a clean technology. We see the solar market primarily for us and kind of engineering and construction efficiency, the ability to keep clean tech buildings and careful energy usage as a big part of that. And then we really need to get back to the basics in California. We've worked that very hard, and I can honestly say in the last 12 to 18 months, GPAC is probably in California on average every week or every 2 weeks with people in San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Silicon Valley. So recapturing California, and during this downturn, and it's pure speculation to be honest with you, because no one's ever been in a credit crisis before. We've had different kinds of economic crises. We've had fuel shortages, and we've had manufacturing crises where aggressive outsourcing was occurring. But we've never really quite had the faucet shut off like it has. And I think my guess is first quarter next year to second quarter that will change, and I think we'll do very well. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on the California market. It's an expensive market. A lot of companies that have been there operating are going to find it even more prohibitive to operate. They have a huge budget deficit. I think California is probably planning to extend its taxing environment and extending its regulatory environment, and I think you're going to see more operational activity be forced out of the California market. So I think between those three, while we're going through those correction, that's going to be some of the opportunities that are going to be presented to us, most likely. And if I have any questions during the presentation, Mr. Vice Mayor, please feel free to raise your hand. That was a lot of information, so if you want me to just get going because you have more important things to do, I'll do that too. Yes, sir.
Barry, you mentioned asking or contacting the state for help. How is the state going to help you when it's faced with such budget crisis that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what is not in the vernacular of the state is this idea of competing for companies for foregone, revenue. I mean, I no matter what condition the state was, I don't believe in fiscally underwriting companies coming to the state. Now, what I mean by that is if you're going to throw money at something, build sustainable research institutions around your universities. And if the governor has $100 million that she can appropriate, or the legislature, they'd be better off putting that in the Science Foundation of Arizona and making the universities smarter. They're more sustainable economic models than competing with other states for industries. But, for instance, in our solar program, we put a renewable tax credit. We had $8 billion worth of investment, and there's still a major investment looking at this community. And these are staggering investments, $500 million, $700 million job investment, hundreds if not thousands of jobs. But, the ability to take something like a tax credit, which can offset the cost of that company moving here doesn't necessarily mean that that tax credit is going to make a negative impact on the state's budget. So it's understanding how you, and the challenge with that, Councilman, is the state has very few programs. They're poorly written, and they all do cost money. So whenever you say we need to set state economic development, they immediately go to a film tax credit, or they go to alt fuels, or they go to their current enterprise zone program, which gives a tax break to people who get jobs on Access. The average family is getting underwritten $21,000 a year through Access, and 50% of the jobs in the enterprise zone program in Arizona are eligible for that benefit. Now, why would you give an incentive to a company to come here and pay $9.94 an hour and then turn around and have that family go on the state dole for health care because the company can't afford it? But these are the things that are part of what have to be cleaned up in Arizona. And if you hear about other states writing programs, very few states will actually underwrite a company coming here, decide that the company's value to them is worth giving away more tax dollars than they collect. I mean, the only two states that I've seen do that in my entire career, I saw Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama at around 1990 when they didn't have anything willing to do it because they needed to create employment and they weren't competitive at all. And then I've seen Texas and New Mexico do it with oil reserves because it's discretionary money that isn't being leveraged for health care and schools and so on and so on. Outside of those states, I've never seen a state really do that with any consistency. And even in places like Texas, where they can do it, it's still controversial, and people are starting to pull back on that.
So why are those other states getting those companies that we're losing?
Well,
You just described, I know the legislature has never come out with a comprehensive program.
well, that's part of it, and we need that.
And even in the best of the best times, our legislature has not done that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so what is it that is the driving force that these other states keep getting these companies?
Well, these other states have a history. I think there's a couple of things, and this is the opportunity being a downturn. We've never been stung hard enough and long enough for us, I think, historically to really change our behavior. And that's pure speculation, and maybe that's not right. But, outside of 80, 81, 82, I mean, this place has had a pretty good run for almost over 50 years. I mean, we over 50 years, we've had about 5 or 6 years of real downturn in a 50-year cycle. Most states have a downturn every 5 or 6 years over 50 years. So when you've just known prosperity, it's really hard for you to think that you have to prepare for something else. I mean, right? We complained about gas when it got to $4. It's down to $2.50. We're starting to go back to sleep again. It's just human nature. So I think that's been part of it. I think the other thing too is I really haven't seen well thought out proposals brought to the legislature. As a policymaker, there's things you want to do, but even if someone is matching your intentions with a bad deal, you got to vote no on it. And I don't think we've proposed the right ideas. I mean, I like to speak on behalf of the state legislators and not point fingers. I don't think they've had a body of work put in front of them that's been very impressive. So hopefully what we're trying to do with some of these initiatives, like our solar piece, is taking a technology that Arizona can dominate, taking a technology that has a lot of money invested in it now, taking a technology that brings other benefits to Arizona, like an energy source that we might need in 20 years, trying to combine those around companies that pay health care and high wages, and then showing the state how they can use a state economic development program to win those projects, be a player in that industry, and make money while they do it. And if we can do that. Now, whether they'll believe us or not is another thing, but we can do that. And that would be our goal.
Why hasn't Arizona done anything with the tax credit on solar? This is obviously the state that has probably the most sun. New Mexico has done it. Colorado's done it. Why hasn't I think the governor's office, is there any way to persuade either the legislature or the governor's office to make this thing, we've got to have the tax credit. They won't come here without it.
Right.
And what needs to be done?
Well, one of the things that we've done is I think we've met with your intergovernmental folks. So we've got your intergovernmental people to sit down. We're really deal guys at the end of the day. We're community economic development people, and we know how to do deals. So we're not experts on how to get the legislature to change their behavior. But we've talked to your intergovernmental people that have. We've talked to the Arizona Municipal League. The county supervisors, I think, are going to be very supportive of this. And I was on the phone with some of the governor's people before I came out here. So hopefully getting people to be open-minded about it and to revisit it, I think, is the first step. We paid Elliott Pollock. We raised about $100,000 last year to give them financials. I mean, it's a lot of money to run these financial scenarios. Private sector gave us the money, and we gave them data that Elliott Pollock produced and other people that showed them that, on a $1 billion project, after you gave the credit, the net benefit to the state in new taxes on our average project was $108 million in new taxes. So you had to manage the credit. You had to burn the credit off against the construction sales tax. That's how the credit got paid for in the first few years. You took a haircut for a couple of years, and you had to manage that. But after that, the state did very well with it, and the employment wages were running at about, our average income in our portfolio last year was $64,000, and that's with health care benefits. And so when you consider the enterprise zone's hurdle is $9.94 an hour, $64,000 sounds pretty good to me. So we're continuing to work on a councilman, and Dr. Crow, as people told me today, they would help us, and I think we got a real shot at it. But one of the things that's really important that I think we do with the state, we know we have a budget crisis, but what's our budget crisis tied to? It's tied to economic performance. I mean, we're too tied to this. Someone told me that our economy is we sell houses to people who build houses. And we need to build a different economy. And we really can't afford, even though this budget's been tough and will be tough for another year or two, we can't sit 3 years out. And other states won't. Other states will, that are more experienced at dealing with these economic downturns. They will fire sell assets. They will tap pension funds. They will find resources to increase their economic competitiveness. And we need to do the same. And I think we can do it and hold the state budget neutral. But we're going to need some political will and political leadership out of our friends in the legislature. And we're going to need it from the governor, and if she's still here, if she's not, in a presidential cabinet or whatever her long-term plans are.
When you say turnaround in April, are you referring to the state of Arizona, or are you talking generally across the board?
I'm just talking about credit. The first thing that has, right now what's happened is healthy companies that we're competing for that want to select Arizona that have wonderful credit can't get money lent to them by banks. Okay, so when, and that's when I was saying before, this is the first time I've been, I've been doing this 20 years. So I've gone through periods where sectors of the economy weren't healthy. And so, Chinese competition affecting the semiconductor space. So you can go in and evaluate how tough China is or what the sector's doing to compete with that. But when people just aren't being loaned money because the banks are nervous and they're waiting to see what happens and how this bailout works and what Bernanke says and Paulson says, that's a phenomenon I've not seen in 20 years. And if you don't know my background, I spent my career in Ohio and Michigan. So I think if I've not seen it, it's probably, less, maybe Flint, Michigan saw it, but I mean, it's probably not been seen if you've been knocking around Cleveland and Toledo and those places, because we saw everything. So I think what's going to happen, I really feel better about this than most people, but I really do think the banks are going to calm down and the markets are going to calm down by first or second quarter next year. And then the healthy companies will go back to putting money to work. And then once the healthy companies go back to putting money to work because they have credit, then you're going to start to see a change in the economic conditions. And as soon as you start seeing upward ticks in economic conditions, you'll see Wall Street settle in. And then once you see Wall Street settle in, you'll see consumer confidence start to restore. And I think we'll be growing by 2010. We will be. Some people won't be, but I think we will be.
So you think 2009 is still going to be a rough year?
Yeah, I didn't at first, but I'm now starting. We've been on the phone. The good news about GPEC is we have the chairman of the boards of these banks on our board, so they get us in conference calls with their economists out of New York and their analysts, and I'd say second quarter next year or sooner will be when credit's restored, and then there'll be a 6 to 12 month lag from credit restoration. So 2009 is probably going to be another challenging year for us.
So everybody's finding their footing
is what's going to happen
Right.
next. Yeah.
But one of the things that's good right now is, I had 2 hours with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company last week. You usually can't get in to see him. And so they're more, the reason we are selling so hard right now, even though, like I've told our team, we may not have a lot of good things to say for a few months, is, normally when we're competing for companies, we're screened from the decision makers, and they have consultants keeping us away. So we're competing for the project and the mechanics of the project and not getting to the company leadership. During a downturn, they're not working with their consultants because they're not paying these $1 million consulting fees. And so the way they're getting information is they're talking to GPEC. So our audience with CEOs are at an all-time high right now because they want to know what's going on in your state, what are you seeing, what are your banks saying, what are you hearing out of the capital markets. And so, we're getting, so what we're doing now is we do these like market overviews for CEOs, and we fly into California and get in front of a lot of CEOs just to give them a market overview, and it takes an hour. There's no deal, but, we finally get in front of them and can persuade them on this market, and then when they reorganize next year, that's going to put us, I think, in good stead.
You're planting seeds.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Good.
Yeah, I feel pretty optimistic about where we're at in spite of everything. I talked a little bit about the international markets, and you talked about solar. So to give you, we are 9th in the nation in solar usage in the United States, and some of the states that are in front of us in solar usage are New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Oregon. Because
Way to shine there.
because they've been building state policy to stimulate and promote the use of the technology. So the industries, so when we talk to California solar companies about the valley, they want to know things like workforce availability. They're interested in those tax credits because they're looking to lower their costs. But the European markets, they're coming to Arizona. They want to sell their technology in the state. So as you sell the market internationally, you get different interests. So the Germans and the Spain, Netherlands, they're interested in, what's your megawatt usage, what kind of photovoltaics are put on your roofs. Because if they're going to come in and do an investment, a manufacturing facility, an engineering facility, part of how they're going to pay for that investment in the U.S. is locating someplace where they're going to get revenue from their sales. So they're asking about demand. California has tremendous demand. So when a California evaluates the market, they want to know, can I get talented people and how much lower my expense going to be coming to Arizona versus choosing Colorado versus choosing New Mexico versus choosing, a place like Oregon. And then, of course, one of the other things we've been talking about right now is, should we have a capital strategy internationally? A lot of the shift in the capital markets have been really interesting, but we put a strategy together with Dubai and the Middle East, and one of the things we were looking there at was sources of capital, and we're now starting to wonder, should we have a capital strategy? So if you were doing, if you look at how the economy is changing, you might be doing a completely unrelated development to us, bringing an employment center, and you might have an investor that might need to raise $50 million, and maybe GPEC supports that investor's ability to try to raise $50 million from overseas sources because the decision-making has changed. Am I going too long?
Your board member has a function to go to later. but
Okay.
Other than that,
Okay, well then I'm almost done.
Said that.
I'm giving you a hard
Barry,
time.
you
Barry,
take your
time.
time.
You're doing fine.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't
I'm
want to
giving you a
take too
hard time.
much because,
You waited a long time to get you here.
yeah, I'm always anxious to be out here, and then but I don't want to overstate my popularity. I want to get, as they say in a theater, you want to leave the stage having them wanting more, as they say. But obviously, this California option we really like. I would really encourage you to be thinking about how you utilize and what your local policies are around things like promoting LEED certified buildings and things like that. And I think one of the solar companies we located out here has done some workshops out here. Are they planning workshop? Okay. So one of our companies that we located, about 150 jobs, wants to come out and do an educational piece in Goodyear, helping your residents understand. Because there's a lot of misconceptions about photovoltaic. Oh, you got to pay $25,000 out. It's not true. I mean, we have a company that can get a home solarized for $1,000 out of pocket if they're credit worthy, and then they have that credit thing's like a big deal now. So I mean, like it wasn't before, but now it's almost like due diligence. And then they do almost a power purchase agreement, the way Abengoa, the Solano deal out in the outlying areas, did with APS. So the California piece we're pretty excited about, and I'm really excited about the healthcare piece. So part of what we're looking on right now, this is kind of interesting, but we have, and they gave me this number and said, you should use this number carefully. And I said, well, you shouldn't have given me the number because I'm not going to use that number carefully because it's a good number as far as selling the market goes. We have about $2 billion of healthcare work in this market that leaves this region to go elsewhere because we're short healthcare providers. So when you see the Cancer Treatment Centers of America come here and there was a little, we had little. Go ahead.
When you say healthcare work, are you talking about patients leaving the
Yeah,
market
patients
to go
leave,
get patient care?
diagnostic
Okay.
works, all kinds of things. I mean, it's a booming market, and the Arizona Healthcare Association's put information out that says that we're about at 50% capacity in this market. So building on to cancer treatment out here, I think, is a real opportunity where you can maybe leverage an oncology play, maybe a late-stage oncology play all the way through. But they've been, we're documenting that right now through Blue Cross and Blue Shield and some others that are doing that. But we're going to go into markets like Nashville and Minneapolis and healthcare that have very large healthcare presence and talk to them about making, asset investments in this market around this. And part of this is going to be about being able to recruit the best doctors. So one of the bills that went through the legislature, very controversial. The governor's a trial lawyer, so she won't be a good one to get to sign this. But the need to move towards medical liability in Arizona and focus on things like tort reform. There are states that are absolutely putting themselves out of the healthcare business because their medical liability on physicians is so ridiculous. But a place like Texas, for instance, which has gotten very aggressive in that space, is now recruiting the physicians out of Ohio and Pennsylvania that are leaving those great healthcare institutions that are having a decline in patients. So these physicians are, where am I going to go now? I have this big medical degree that I paid for, and I have a decline in patient activity. And then places like Texas. We actually brought a company in here who specializes in doing that, recruiting physicians to a market, in-house assist, who also located in the West Valley there in Glendale. So we think between cancer treatment centers, in-house assists, we can really get into these markets and start really driving healthcare impacts into this market. And then I think concurrently we need to be looking at a policy strategy on really making this the best place for a doctor to practice in the United States, which will then allow us to be a real healthcare mecca.
And live.
Yeah. Might even
And how receptive do you think the legislature is to that?
Legislature's passed it once. I think the governor vetoed it. It's a trial lawyer, so it's like, it's like asking, it's asking a lot of somebody with trial lawyer training to do it. I don't know what it's like asking a baseball player to play tennis or something, but it's a big ask of a trial lawyer. So in defense of the governor, but I think that in the next 2 years, whether she moves on for another career opportunity or whether or not she leaves after 2 terms, I think we have a chance at getting a governor in that office that'll understand how important that is. So I think this is a big opportunity for us. And again, like Cancer Treatment Centers of America, most of their patients are coming from out of state. So contrary to what some of our friends were concerned about, this isn't somebody coming in here slicing out of the pie. This is somebody coming in here bringing more of the pie in and then making the pie bigger, but also, treating patients in an unmet disease area that other people aren't treating them. So by bringing cancer treatment centers and not only hundreds of great paying jobs for Goodyear residents, but treatment for people that otherwise isn't being offered. And then, of course, an opportunity to leverage that by bringing more export employment into the area because people are going to come from around the world to use Cancer Treatment Centers of America. So those are the people working on our healthcare strategy. And then there's our current outlook. And as you can see, business services is where we get a lot of those regional headquarters, and we only have 2 prospects. So those aren't bad numbers, but they're not great. The problem with the numbers isn't the prospects. Our prospecting activity is pretty high. The problem is the trigger pulling activity has been taken off the table. So we had 5 company announcements that were rescinded since the announcement of Bernanke and Paulson that they needed the $700 billion to stabilize the financial markets. So, and they're not likely to be, they're not projects we're going to lose permanently, but I don't think we'll see them till they'll re-engage us probably in late 2009.
What is the available square footage?
That is about the average size of our project. And this is really important. That's when I talk to you about, the Rubbermaid plant. We love those facilities because we run into people all the time that say, I need 450,000 square feet. Well, it's a 3-year project if you got to build it for them. If you have it for them, it can be a 90-day permit turnaround or a 120-day permit turnaround. So when you have that facility, you've already knocked 2.5 years off of the development time for that company, and sometimes the existing facility will be less expensive than new construction. So it'll be an automatic opportunity for GPEC to promote a facility like that, and I'm overwhelmingly confident that we'll probably be the originating source for an opportunity in that for the community. But if you can see, most of our, if you look at, and this is, it won't be so germane now because we're going to have variances and there'll be some surplus product, and some of our developers that got ahead of themselves won't be too anxious to expand. But most of our projects are large.
Now, how involved are you as GPEC in commercial retail outlets and commercial retail shopping centers, that kind of thing, or just just industrial buildings that aren't built that have? I guess what I'm getting to is there are many of these small cities over here that have space for it and plans for commercial and industrial areas, but don't have the infrastructure in. Whereas in Goodyear, where we, for instance, we put the ballpark in, working on that, we've got infrastructure in there that's ready for a ready-built commercial.
That's why you have a 221 to return on your GPEC investment. I mean, an average return on a GPEC investment is 48 to 1. So your return's 5 times the rate of the average return of another community because you put the infrastructure in. And of course, things like community facilities districts, which, this is mostly Harry's business, so we only stick our nose in it. If we lose about 4 deals in a row, we'll start bugging people about it. And like these community facility districts, I think they should be more aggressively used. Now, I'm not an expert on them. My colleagues that run the local economic development shops have asked me not to do that. It's like the $2 billion number, though, that the healthcare guy gave me. I can't help myself. But, if you can, the more improvement, when your land's improved and ready to go, you are in the driver's seat, especially in a market like this. You're in the driver's seat. Because one of the things, we've talked with the economic development people about this at the city level, we had so much pent-up interest in this market. You could point to a cornfield and you had a shot at a guy going in and, all right, well, I'll wait 2 years for the permits and I'll pay for the improvements. I mean, there was some incredible interest in this market in 04, 5, 6. But I don't think you're going to see that kind of interest in this market for several years again. And even though I think we'll be doing well, I think we're going to be doing well with improved employment centers, not unimproved employment centers. And so we need to come up with a constructive way to give local communities the financing support they need to put as much improved employment center space in as possible. If you just keep your nose to the grindstone on that, and give good development services, deliverables to companies, you'll do really well. Now, we can get a lot more sophisticated than that, like building life science strategies around cancer treatment centers, and we should. But if you just do those basics real well, you're going to do very well. And that's why your return's been so high, because you did do that. And that's why Chandler does so well. Chandler does so well because Price Road, all throughout Chandler, has all kinds of unique infrastructure underneath of it you can't find anywhere else in Arizona. And so we get a big, high-performance advanced manufacturer that has all kinds of specialty needs in its infrastructure, and it's already in Price Road. And they'll go there, in some cases, they'll go there and pay 50% above market for the land because it's the only place where it's doable. So I always like Chandler as Chandler's a nice community to learn from and model from because, one of the other things that Chandler did is they backed off on their growth about 2 or 3 years ago. They did some planning and zoning decisions that would reduce their population trend by 50,000 people. I mean, you only want to, I always like to say that if you're a city of 250 to 300,000 people and you're in a metro area, you can do anything. You can absolutely do it. You don't need to go to 500,000 people. So if you start looking at going to 400,000 or 500,000 people, then you start asking yourself 25 years from now, what kind of long-term metropolitan problems am I leading for the next generation of leaders that's going to have to manage a big city with big city problems? Or do you want to right-size your community and, be kind of a high-valued community inside this larger metro market, which by 2025 will be 7 million people.
How do you downsize, or how do you level off without losing the growth in the city, that is the industrial growth, or having the industrial growth taper off to the point you don't want it to?
Well, that's what I mean. It's a population trend. You want as many jobs as possible. You
But
can't
need
lose
people there too.
Well, but your people. The one reason why regionalism work is those cancer treatment centers. People from Phoenix are going to drive to work at cancer treatment centers, and there's going to be people from Glendale that are going to drive there. So your workforce is a regional tool that floats around. So Goodyear people drive to Phoenix. Phoenix people are going to drive to Goodyear. And so the more robust employment center you have, it just gives you a lot of taxing options long term. It makes you a more stable economic player in the market. It makes you a stronger player in the market. So the people will come. The people will follow jobs. We've done it because of our popularity and affinity by people. We've put in housing without jobs and got people. And of course we're paying for it right now. It's supposed to be kind of reverse engineered a little bit. And so, not knowing the total details, I don't want to speak for Chandler's planning. I've just had some conversations with them. But I think they changed their kind of lot to coverage ratios. They did some things on the planning side that would just guarantee that they would have less people. Some of it was, expanding employment corridors, reducing residential environments. And of course, you got to be more patient. One of the things about these big residential growth patterns is, real estate people want to strike while the iron's hot, and they push our cities into gerrymandering and getting outside their planning principles so they can strike while the iron's hot. And sometimes we do that because we think, oh, this will be good, more people's good. And then sometimes we get caught behind the curve a little bit. And right now, I think there's some cities caught behind the curve that did that. Would have been better off being patient and waiting for employment. Because you'll never be sorry. However many employers you get, you'll be glad forever when you get them. But, when you build too much housing and you get too much people consume, disproportionate amount of city services. I mean, I'm sure you know all the financials. I'm sure your city manager's shown you that.
But it doesn't affect the residential. The residential doesn't affect the fact that you may lose some of your industry.
Yeah, the industry will come here for competitive reasons. They do need to find the people. But even like Cancer Treatment Centers of America, they didn't need to find all their people in Goodyear. So if you were making more equity-driven employment center management as part of your city planning and land use planning, Goodyear, and then if your housing standards are risen, then you're going to multiply the kind of impacts you had from cancer treatment, because they're going to come out here because you're going to have the executive housing, and then they're going to come out here because it's a great place to do business, and then they'll rely on where are they getting their people now? They're bringing them in from Tulsa, Philadelphia, Chicago. They're recruiting from these people all around the world. So their recruitment's coming from around the world. Another big economic impact for the valley.
Is that your last slide?
That was it.
Okay. I
Spared you.
didn't want to.
I have a streaming video now. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
So
You're giving an introduction to the market, right?
yeah. So exactly right.
Just kidding.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Barry? No?
Well, we enjoy working with you. Your team's doing a great job, and you have a lot of success because you're positive people working hard for your community, and I appreciate the opportunity to be before you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. I think definitely we've seen a lot of value from Barry and his organization, and obviously GPEC. A $221 return, I think, is what you said at the very beginning. You ought to end on that slide. Because oftentimes we're having a discussion over here whether or not to invest $20,000 a year into your organization. So I think it's important for us to realize we're getting a 200% return on our investment to GPEC. Maybe not for this evening's discussion, but maybe the future date we could steal some industry knowledge from our economic development director, because we ripped him off, I think, from Chandler, right? Didn't we? So maybe some of that investment in infrastructure, we could learn some lessons from Harry.
Harry, you came in.
And hear what those decisions were and how that went about. I think that would be of value. And look at how we can seize those opportunities that Chandler is now seizing, because during the downturn, they definitely were investing in their community and have benefited from it. So, seeing that we have nothing else, I've got my agendas swapped up here. Help me out. Here we go.
Any council member reports on current events?
Oh, report on the Blue Sky Award.
The Blue Sky Award.
Yes.
Have at it.
In fact, Councilman Cavalier,
No, we're going to present that next week.
are you going to do it next week?
Yeah.
Would you rather I hold off since we
Yeah.
already got it? Okay. Just to say that the West Valley Hospital teamed up with the City of Goodyear and won the Blue Sky Award, and Frank said it's going to be presented next week, and he'll tell us more about it. I also took a tour of the fire station, and I wanted to let the chief know it was excellent. The guys were just good guides, and took me through the whole thing, and I can't wait for the opening. It's coming, and I'm sure you'll have a full house. And just want to let you know I surprised them on purpose. So, Chief and I talked about that one, and he was going to
I
give
didn't
me a tour.
surprise him, I made an appointment.
Oh, not me. I went in and surprised them, and it was really very interesting how involved they got and how excited they are and what's going on there at the station. And they're all, the guys that escorted me around, I say guys very loosely because one of them was a lady. However, they were all like 6 months recruits, and they were just so, I said, you like your job? Yeah, you know. So it's really exciting. And then I was a part of the CERT last night when it all comes together, and it was almost like being there for Halloween. We had corpses, their faces were all painted white, we had blood and gore, and I mean, they loved it. All the victims were just really enthused about being victims. So I'm going to let you know that we must continue that program. It was really, really worth it to see how everybody got into it and how much they learned. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll just report kudos to the baseball team. Again, not the baseball team Indians, but Brian, you led that team. And we had an honorable mention at Westmark on Thursday night. In the sports category, and to no surprise, we were beat out by just a small little venue in a Super Bowl. So it's nice to come in second behind a $500 million economic benefit to the region. So kudos to your team again for another honorable mention and another award. With that, I'm going to adjourn the work session. I'm going to reconvene the special meeting. I'm going to ask staff be expeditious. We're going to go into executive session. So have at it. Stick around. I'm going to ask for a motion about whether or not we can go into executive session, but we're going to shut down the chambers after we do that. Last one out the door, I think, has to buy everybody coffee tomorrow. So, no, I'm just kidding. Right? So I'll adjourn the work session and reconvene the special meeting. And upon roll call vote,